Page 181, continuing our topic 3 review. Lesson 3.3 was on the percent equation. Percent equation, we basically talked about if you see the word is, that means equals. If you see the word of, that means multiply. Sometimes they didn't word them as well for us to use the percent equation. If you're able to come up with an equation on your own, that's great. If not, remember you can always use the proportion as well, or if you have a different way of figuring out the answer. I'm not going to make you do the problems a certain way on your tests. So number one, if Sharon paid $78 sales tax on a new camera, the sales tax rate is 6.5%. What was the cost of the camera? So I'm going to kind of just go back to the proportion idea. Proportion, we did part over whole equals percent over 100. And we'll just think about what things we know and what thing that we're trying to find. So one of the things you might notice initially is that we know what the percent is. So the percent is 6.5%, which is 6.5 over 100. Then the other question is, where does the 78 go? $78 is the tax that we paid, so that's the part, and we're trying to figure out what the whole is. So this would be what the proportion would look like if you set it up that way. So for this, there's actually a pattern. If you do 78 divided by 6.5, you get 12. We're going this direction, so that would be multiplying by 12 because we're getting bigger numbers. And so 100 times 12 would be 1,200. So that means the camera would have cost $1,200. Another way we could have done this, if we did an equation, we could have said 6.5% of whatever the cost of the camera was is equal to $78. And then we could have divided by 65 thousandths. And again, if you knew just to take 78 divided by 65 thousandths to find your answer, that would be okay also. But if you can try and get it set up as a proportion or an equation to start out, that would probably be the best. Number two, there are 45 students who play a woodwind instrument. Of these, 18 play the saxophone. So the question, what percent of the students play the saxophone? So one way to do this, you might be able to just think about that we could take 18 divided by 45 and get that as a decimal, move your decimal over 2 spots. That would be your answer. If not, you could do a proportion would be an option. It's 18 is our part, 45 is the whole. We're trying to find the percent. One option, looking for a pattern, if you do 45 divided by 18, you get 2.5. And we're going this direction, so that would be dividing by 2.5. And there's other ways you could do this pattern as well, but this is just one option. And then 100 divided by 2.5 would be 40, which would be 40%. If you think about it, hopefully that makes sense. Half of 45 would be 22 and a half. Obviously we can't have 22 and a half people, but that would be 50%. So we're just a little below 50%. So 40% seems reasonable. Lesson 3.4 was on percent change and percent error problems. Percent change we talked about. For percent change, we took the change over the original amount. Again, the book did these a little different. You can kind of see off to the side. So if you look at number one, in 2014, the attendance at Jefferson School's Fall Festival was 650. In 2015, the attendance was 575. So what was the percent change in attendance? And they said round to the nearest whole percent. So we're going to have to figure out our change and our original amount here. So to find our change, we're just going to subtract these. Just do the biggest number minus the smallest number. So 650 minus 575. If you subtract that, you get 75 as the change. And then we need to do the change divided by the original amount. So our change was 75. Our original amount is what happened first. So that was in 2014. The attendance was 650. So 650 is our original amount. And we can just divide that out. So when we divide that out, we get 0.115384615, and the numbers probably keep going. It's just rounding it off there. We need to get this in a percent form, and then we're going to round to the nearest whole percent. So to change this to a percent, we'll move the decimal 2 places to the right. So it's 11.5 something percent. We're going to go into the nearest whole percent. So 11.5, it's between 11 and 12. It is closer to 12. So we're going to say this is about 12% change. So if we go to number 2, Melissa estimated she would read 250 pages last week. And she read 290 pages. What is the percent error of Melissa's estimate? Round to the nearest whole percent. So for percent error, it's similar idea to percent change. Percent error, we did the change divided by the actual. Instead of change over the original, we did change over the actual. So first we'll find our change. So 290 minus 250 is a difference of 40. And then we're going to do the change over the actual. So 40 is our change. So she actually read 290 pages, so that would be our actual number. We need to divide that out. So that comes out to 0.137931034. At this point, we're just going to move our decimal and then round this off. So move your decimal over 2 spots. So we're about 13.79%, and that's closer to 14%. Lesson 5 was on markup and markdown problems. There were 2 ways we talked about doing these problems. One way, like the book's showing, is you could find what the markup or markdown is if you multiply the percent as a decimal times whatever the number was we were starting with. On a markup, we'll add that to the amount. On a markdown, we'll subtract that from the amount. Another way is figuring out what percent you're going to pay. Like, for example, if you had a 20% markup, you could say, normally I pay 100%. 20% markup means I'm going to pay 120%. So you could do 1.2 or 1.20 times, let's say it was $500. You could just work that out, and that would actually give you what your final cost would be after the markup. But like I said, your other option is just to figure out, in this case, what 20% of that would be. And then once you get that answer, which I think would be $100, you would just add that on to what you had to start with. So either way you do that, you're going to get $600. It's just different options of how to work it out. So if you look at the problems here, so we'll look at the problems. Number 1, Hank buys a used car for $7,200 and plans to sell it on his used car lot. What is the price of the car after a markup of 15%? So one way of doing this problem is we could first find out what 15% of $7,200 is. So change your percent to a decimal. If you multiply that, is $1,080. That's the markup. If they ask for the markup amount, that's what that would be. So the markup is just going to get added on to the $7,200. And so the selling price would be $8,280. So if we look at number 2, Naya wants to buy a sweater that had an original price of $55. The sweater is now discounted 20%. Sales tax is 5.5%. So the question is, how much will she pay for the sweater? So this is a good real life problem. We got a discount. We've also got tax that we've got to figure in. So different ways we could work this out. One way we could think about full price would be 100%. It's 20% off. Means we're going to pay 80% before tax. Remember, we have to figure out what the price is first before we can figure out the tax. We can't just do this all in one step. So 80% of $55 is $44. That would be the sale price. So then we've got to figure out what our tax is. The tax is 5.5%. Again, different options. We'll just go ahead and go with the 5.5% as it is. Change it to a decimal. Would be $2.42. That's the amount of the tax. And then that gets added on to the $44, which would be $46.42 altogether. Lesson 6 was on simple interest problems. For the simple interest problems, you might remember we did a little differently than the book. We used the formula I equals PRT. I was the interest. P was the principal, which was the amount of money we borrowed or invested. R was the interest rate as a decimal, and T was the time in years. So again, I encourage you to write the formula down every time you do the problems, and then you can substitute into that formula. So number 1, Ethan put $700 into a certificate of deposit or CD account that earns 1.8% interest each year. What will the interest of the CD account be after 6 years? So you can kind of look at the different parts here and think about what we're trying to find. So the $700 is our principal. We'll put that in place of the P. So our interest rate is 1.8%. Move the decimal over 2 spots, would be 18 thousandths. Then the time they told us is 6 years. We have one variable left, which is I, which makes sense because the question is, what will the interest be? So we are trying to find the interest. On this one then, the I is already by itself. It's just a matter of simplifying the other side of the equation. So you can just multiply those together. So if you multiply those together, you should get 75.6. Add a 0 on the end. That means interest would be $75.60. One thing to think about also, they could ask what the account balance would be at this point. They didn't do that, but if they asked for the account balance, so in that case, we would just take the $700 we originally had plus the $75.60 for the interest, and that would be $775.60 would be our account balance. So look at number 2. Kelly opened a bank account that earns 1.2% interest. After 7 years, she will earn $126 in interest. And the question is, how much did Kelly deposit when she opened the account? So I'm going to start with my formula. So since it says how much did she deposit, that means we are trying to find the principal. The other stuff we should know. So the interest is $126. The rate we're going to change to a decimal is 12 thousandths, and then the time is 7 years. So in this case, we are going to simplify a little bit on the right side of the equation. So if you multiply 12 thousandths times 7, you get 84 thousandths. So finally, to solve for the variable, it's being multiplied by a number. We need to divide by that number on both sides of the equation. So it cancels out over there. And then we divide that out, and that should be $1,500. So that means she deposited $1,500. If you have time, what you could do, take the $1,500, put that in place of the principal, and work this out and just verify that you get $126. As long as we set everything up correctly initially, we should be in good shape with that answer. One final note in addition to this, if you remember, we did a lesson on tax, tips, and commission, so make sure you look over that as well. Thanks and have a good day.